How are we done? So, this is a video to cover my GW32 preview, more specifically covering a free hit draft. So, I think a majority of FPL managers will be playing their free hit chip. Free hit chip being you can change your entire team for 1 week, but then you get your team back for the following week. If you haven't got the free hit chip, it's going to be quite a tough week for you if unless your team is already set up. But yeah, these are the weeks that are definitely why you like playing FPL because you get to play a chip, meaning you can change your whole team. It's just very exciting, very fun. And yeah, so in this video, I'm going to cover the teams that I think we should be targeting, the players that we should be targeting, or the selection I think we should be thinking of, then must have players, and then the decisions I'm thinking of for my team specifically, or just in general, what I think the sort of combinations we could be doing with a free hit draft, and then just a review of my free hit team so far. It could change, of course, after this video, but I think I've targeted the key players that I would definitely want to be keeping. Okay, so let's have a look at the teams to target. So this is just a list, and on the left side or on this first column, basically it's just to say we should definitely be targeting Arsenal and Liverpool players. Why is that? I'll go through the fixtures in a mo and just explain that we probably need like a triple up. Palace have been really good in the last few fixtures. The reason for that is because Roy Hodgson has brought them back from the death. They have also had a nice run in, so maybe it was unlucky for Patrick Vieira, but you know they've got some also quite nice cheap options to go for, the likes of Eze or Elise. But yeah, and then looking at the defense and attack. In terms of the defense, what I'm mainly targeting here is what players do what teams do I think will get clean sheets? So I'd expect maybe a clean sheet, or not expect, but I think it's highly likely that Arsenal, Liverpool will keep a clean sheet. Palace as well, maybe West Ham or Leicester. Only reason Newcastle are on there because they're playing Spurs this week is, do we keep Kieran Trippier? Because he's been a really good points getter for us. But I think it could be a week we don't want him, but then he'll have a large ownership, so he could punish if you don't get him in your free hit draft. In terms of attack, mainly targeting the teams we think will score most goals, but there's also other teams added. For example, Bournemouth, I would only really consider Solanke, so it's not a team overall that I think you should be targeting like Arsenal. You've got so many options, but also like a Leicester, the only attacker I think you should slash I will be considering is Madison. Iheanacho possible, but his minutes could be unreliable. Okay, so firstly, I want to show these percentages, and what I'm showing here is the percentage of likelihood that a team's going to keep a clean sheet. All of this is actually from the site, is extracted from odds data. Which provider, I'm not entirely sure, but you could very easily maybe look on a betting website, look at their clean sheet odds, and then just convert it into the probability. So odds typically reflect the probability of something happening, and so this is basically just like, yeah, converting those odds into the probability. And unsurprisingly, Arsenal and Liverpool are on top in terms of likelihood for clean sheets, and then Crystal Palace follow. Interestingly, Newcastle are fourth, despite them playing Spurs, and I can't remember exactly who's at home and who's away. I don't need to check that, but that is quite high. And then Leicester and West Ham follow after that as well. So I will probably be targeting Arsenal and Liverpool defense. Liverpool specifically because I'm liking their attacking players, or attacking fullbacks, but I'll get to that when we talk about our player shortlist. Okay, so just reflecting more on the teams and the ones, talking a bit more why I'm targeting specific teams for attack and defense. Arsenal, no brainer. They're the league leaders. They have been struggling defensively recently, conceding 2 goals in back-to-back games. But Southampton are struggling quite heavily. Arsenal are at home, even though actually Arsenal, well, at least recently, have collected more points away from home. I don't know if that's still true after recording today, but I would anticipate they're the most likely to keep a clean sheet, I'd expect. And so then it's a choice of whether it's White or Gabriel. But that selection I'll talk a bit more on as Mo. But Liverpool also easy target. Nottingham Forest, they're doing pretty badly in the league. And Liverpool have been struggling this year, but and actually maybe they've been up for more of the bigger games and they have had some shock defeats like Bournemouth, for example. But at home, still tracing for top four, I think they're a team you're going to want to triple up. Like whether there's a shock loss still, that's another thing. But I think it would be silly to not at least have two, probably three Liverpool players. Um, yeah. And then Crystal Palace, they're at home. As I've said before, Roy Hodgson has really helped them so much. They've been scoring a few goals, keeping a few clean sheets, and I think they should be now safe. Not entirely sure the league table right now, but the return of Hodgson has been really good by the owners. I think it was a bit unfair for the fact that Patrick Vieira left, but I guess with at least current results, they're more or less guaranteed survival. So let me just have a look at my list again. But yeah, so I think West Ham, Newcastle, Leicester in terms of defence. What's interesting there is Wolves aren't necessarily a high scoring team, though they have had a nice run of form where they've scored in quite a few of their games consecutively. So, and also as Leicester, their defense they've been really poor this year. Dean Smith isn't necessarily a defensive coach, so could you trust them to get them to clean sheet? Not sure. Looking at Newcastle, so Newcastle are at home, so that I guess increases their chance of a clean sheet. But against Spurs, or at least against Harry Kane, a chance of a clean sheet, I wouldn't think it'd be really high. And they haven't also been that great defensively. They haven't kept a clean sheet as often as they did at the start. And looking at West Ham are an interesting one because they're in Europe, so they've been playing a lot of games recently. Bournemouth as well. With after their high and winning against Tottenham last week. Solanke with actually quite good underlying numbers. Would they keep a clean sheet as well? Not sure. I think in terms of the defenders, I almost likely will play a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3 formation for my team. So I'm targeting three defenders and a goalkeeper, and majority of that I think will come from Arsenal, Liverpool, and then probably Palace. So those are the main teams I'm targeting for defense. So maybe for me it's not as difficult thinking about what teams to target like amongst Leicester, West Ham, or Newcastle. But those I think are also the second tier teams to think about in terms of clean sheets. So first tier being Arsenal, Liverpool, and Palace. Then I'd say like the Leicester, West Ham's, Newcastle. Yeah. So okay. So let's have a look at the players I think you should be targeting. Okay. So let's start with goalkeepers. I think, and you're gonna get a slow review of my current team so far, but we'll focus on the watch list. Right, Allison. These are the goalkeepers I'm considering on my watch list. Is that level? Okay, that's annoying. That is okay. Well, I'll go through this list and then go to the next page for the other keepers. So, in terms of actually, this is what I'll do. No, that's fine. Okay, so let's have a look at firstly the goalkeepers that I'm considering for this draft. I think Iverson, actually, he's on the next page, so I'll talk about him in a mo. But I think we should at least target one Liverpool defender. As you can see, my current draft, which I'll talk about more later, is this. Actually, this is not my current draft. This was another thing I was working with, but these are the possible team players I'm thinking of. But back to the goalkeepers. Liverpool are a team I think you should target for defense. most likely to keep a clean sheet. Allison would not be my choice, just because it's pretty low upside. You're not highly unlikely to get, say, like a penalty save or an assist. So I think you should be targeting the defenders on Liverpool, but it's just an option I thought managers can think of. Ramsdale as well, similar to Allison. If you're going to go for an Arsenal defender, especially with the three spots you have, I think a defender is a lot more valuable than just a goalkeeper. In terms of West Ham, Fabianski is a good option. I would say he's a budget option, but he's not. He's 4.9, so he's quite expensive. So there are also other West Ham defenders I would consider as well. So the two picks I'm going to go for most likely is John Stone, who is Palace's keeper. Gaeta is their main keeper, but he's going to be out for the next few weeks. So I think there are a few Crystal Palace defenders that you could think of, but I think as the budget option, John Stone is quite a good option. Iverson then as the backup, he's starting for Leicester. If, say, for example, John Stone got picked up an injury or whatever, Iverson playing against Wolves is actually also quite a nice option, but I would start John Stone. And so those are the keepers. Right, so looking at the defenders, and let me just see if... Cool. Okay. Right. So looking at the defenders, these are the main guys I think I would target. So Trippier's on there only because there could be quite a few managers who are not free hitting. That means they're going to have Trippier. So Trippier now becomes a differential. And with Spurs, you really don't know how they're going to be on the day. So if Trippier got on a clean sheet and an assist, he could be quite a big differential, and you could lose ground unnecessarily, because I think if you look at the fixtures, you'd think, oh, you know what, we may not want Trippier. But if a lot of people are owning him, which for those who don't have the free hit chip, will most likely have him on their team, and they'll be probably one of few players that are actually playing. Lots of teams will have Trippier. I may go out without him, but he's obviously amongst the top picks. So I think, looking a bit at the setup of the team I'm going for, I've currently got 4 Arsenal players, which obviously is not possible. I will show you where I'm going to land of like the team I want to pick, but this is quite close to where it is. I think an Arsenal defender makes sense. Having 3 Arsenal attack, as I mentioned before, I think maybe means you have to get a less good defender from the other teams, whilst there are also other good attackers available. I think it then becomes a choice of White and Gabriel. So if we look at White, basically we can see his XG XA numbers. So this was last week against West Ham, where he got the assists. Obviously he got a goal against Leeds as well, so he's been and an assist against Palace, so he has been getting some nice attacking returns. I think in terms of his goal threat, is few and far between. So the choice is, would you like to guarantee more like an assist from White, but that might be more likely, or well, actually, is that more likely? Let's look at looking at Gabriel's numbers. He does put up consistently decent XG numbers for a defender. He has only scored 3 goals, which is decent but not spectacular. So if you want higher upside, Gabriel probably works better because he's more likely to get a goal, but White would be more likely to get a attacking return. I've so far gone for White, but I could switch to Gabriel, not sure. Now, Liverpool defenders. I have gone for, and I think this may be not a smart choice, but I think it could work out, is 2 Liverpool defenders. I've put down Van Dijk on the watch list as well, along with Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. But I don't think anyone should really go for Van Dijk. Alexander-Arnold or Trent or Robertson are the ones that they're the fullbacks. They're the most likely going to give you a clean sheet. And I think Forest, if Liverpool do actually show up and they really need to, if they want to win or get into the Champions League, could be quite a high scoring game or like a big Liverpool win, and I think that could mean good contributions with assists or even goals from their fullbacks. Trent, in particular, if we look at his numbers, so this is before Liverpool had played Leeds, but if we look, he's got 0.6 expected assists against Arsenal, didn't play against Chelsea, and then City got 0.2 or 0.19. Yeah, just looking at this row, he's been consistently, not spectacularly for Trent, but money's not an issue this week necessarily. Um, and if we looked at, so we can have a look at Robson as well as the Liverpool defence in general. And, well, yeah, we can look at his numbers as well. And Robson hasn't been as good either, but actually a few higher expected assists numbers compared to Trent, surprisingly. But if we look at the XG, so XG conceded, because I think a lot of people would think actually Liverpool defensively have been pretty rubbish. And well, their recent results against the big teams, but they are the big teams, haven't been great. So they conceded how much? Nearly 3 expected goals against City and 1.4. And then conceded 4 and 2 respectively. But if we really look at after a bad loss against Wolves, the expected goals conceded hasn't been that bad. 0.28, 2, pretty bad, but actually didn't concede that game. 0.59, 0.93, 0.88. So not amazing, but they had been they kept 5 clean sheets in a row. They haven't got one in their last 4, but when you say that that's been Arsenal, oh no, sorry, they did get one against Chelsea. Just Trent didn't play. But when Arsenal, Chelsea, and City were amongst those teams, maybe it's understandable. Quite possibly we'll get a clean sheet against Leeds, and I think Forest, there's a very good chance. Right. Looking just a few of the other players, Castagna is just maybe my top pick as a Leicester defender, being a fullback and possibly likely to get attacker returns. If we look at his XGI and the expected assist numbers, they're actually not that great. They're not that great. But of all the Leicester defenders, so he's got 5 goal contributions this year. I'd think he's most likely to get attacking returns. And then, so what I was saying about Fabianski is, I think if I went for a West Ham defender, there are 2 options. There's one on the next page. Zuma's maybe my top pick because actually his XG numbers have been decent. 0.12, 0.09, 0.34. Like, he's actually quite a good goal for it. I think overall, whether you pick Zuma, it's your choice of whether you think West Ham keep a clean sheet. But actually, it could be quite a big haul from Zuma. I'm going to go for John Stone, but Gehi and Anderson are other Palace cheap options as well that you can get into your team. So just the remaining few defenders. Face, he's just a cheap option that if you want to start with a Leicester defender, you can do. I'd go for Castagna, but he would be like maybe a bench option for me. Nico Williams the same, just really cheap if you're trying to squeeze like some lot of premiums. He's a good option. And then Kufau hasn't got the best numbers necessarily, but could always get an assist and very cheap. So, okay, midfielders. So Martinelli. So we're looking at the Arsenal midfielders, and I haven't put Trossard on here just because he has been starting, and he has got quite a few assists since he joined Arsenal, but he's not an FPL option for me. Could he start? Possibly. But of the Arsenal midfielders, Odegaard I haven't added on there as well, but he also is a very good option. The 2 I would go for are Martinelli and Saka. Martinelli has been one of the best attackers in the Premier League this season, but also more recently. Like, if we look at his points since game week 24, it's absolutely ridiculous. He's got 6, 10, 16 to 8, 7, 5, 13, 5. And then 3 goals in his last 5 games, and a contribution in the last 5 games as well. So I think people feared Trossard would rotate with Martinelli a lot, but actually so far Trossard has come off for come on, sorry, for Jesus. So which means the minutes for Martinelli has been quite good. Saka underlying numbers wise, so I'll show Martinelli's again in a minute. Underlying numbers wise, Saka hasn't been amazing. He got one here, but that was his penalty, which obviously he sadly missed. That might also put his penalty duties on doubt. But I think Arteta still believe in Saka because he has scored quite a few of our penalties. But interestingly, Jesus actually came back from the Leeds game, and Saka's numbers. It's only a two game sample size, but his attacking numbers, if you took away the penalty, which is probably about 0.8, would mean his XGI would be about 0.21 and 0.35. So good, but not spectacular relative to what you'd want from Saka. And whether it's that's because of the return of Jesus, that's quite possible. But also, I would sometimes in FPL, I think if an attacker, if he's still in relatively good form and he's playing on a really good team, I guess the attackers are like a due return. So like, it's been three weeks since his return. So I would put a good chance that Saka would get returned against Southampton, and he most likely be on my team. Right. A must have, which I'll get onto actually later, Salah. Salah had a great game against Arsenal the week before. Unlucky to only score one goal, missed a penalty. Does that mean he's on penalties? Not sure. I would think they maybe would give it to Salah still, but who knows? Fabinho would be maybe their second choice, but he's been inconsistent, and maybe when they get it, he's not even on the pitch. Don't know. But Salah has been a frustrating own this year. Hasn't been that amazing, and numbers are being okay. Good numbers against Bournemouth didn't return, but he's probably also amongst the top captain picks, to be honest. And against Nottingham Forest, I think it would be silly to not have Salah, to be honest. And of all the Liverpool attackers, he's one of two I've added, and or maybe three, but that's just because of the possible minutes amongst the team. Like, would Firmino start? If Firmino started, I think he would be quite a good differential. So for a cheap midfielder option, Eze and Elise are just screaming out as perfect options. Let's have a look. Elise became one of the youngest, if not youngest, players to get 3 assists in a Premier League game. If you look at his numbers, it's pretty good. Like XGI of 0.37, 1, and then this would be 0.18. I guess it's just not being updated. So very good numbers. Has returned one big haul in 3 games, but and actually hadn't returned for quite a while before then, but is a very good option. Who I think is a better choice, but they're the same price, is Eze. Since Hodgson's been back, I believe Hodgson was back by the Leicester game. He has returned in all 3 games. He definitely played very well under Hodgson as well, so it's nice to see him return some of his form. Actually, he scored 2 goals last week. Now, maybe it's just me, but sometimes with FPL, if a player has scored really high than last week, you're not anticipating the same heights as the week after. That might just be more confirmation bias, but if you look at this, he scored 2 in a row. Is it likely he'll score 3 weeks in a row? Possibly not. Who is it against? Everton. I think he could score a goal. Like, I'm expecting more like an 8-point return, but after this 16, I wouldn't think it would be another like 2-goal return from Eze. But I think of the mid Palace sort of attackers, Eze would be my top pick. Now, the 8 million bracket, Bowen and Maddison. So both have decent games. So West Ham play Bournemouth, and Leicester play Wolves. Leicester are at home, so I would edge towards Addison if we did choose one of the two 8 million of alternative 8 million options. We look at Madison. His numbers have been uninspiring. Actually, put up very good numbers against City. So, and I think would it be? I reckon it'd be quite popular pick for a lot of managers. Um, but if we look, yeah, his numbers before then wasn't that good, but this would be what 0.7 XGI with a good goal threat as well. I think he'd be quite a popular pick. I'm not sure I'd go for him, or I'm not sure I'm going to go for him, but I think he's due a big return. And actually, he would be, if you don't have him for the free hit draft, he would be a scary player not to have. Bowen just scored against Arsenal and has actually 3 returns in his last 2 games, put in decent numbers. But I think Bowen, why I'm not going to go for him is, so he scored what, 5 goals this season? And then, right, home, Everton, home. All 5 of his goals have been at home. He's away this week. He's against Bournemouth, but they're also in Europe. So I'm not good. I probably won't go for Bowen. I probably would go for Madison if I don't go for Bowen, or if I did go for out one of the two. But both I think are quite good options for the free hit draft. Andreas, he's being one of the darlings of FPL, such a cheap option, and 13 attacking returns. He's gonna be one you're not gonna anticipate a massive haul, but like a 6-8 with a few bonus, 1 assist. Oh, he got 2 here actually. Is probably what you can all expect. I'm not gonna start him, but I think he's gonna be a player you're gonna want on a bench. Outside shout is Jack Harrison. So he didn't put up very good numbers in the Palace game, but that was just a bad game for Leeds in general. Then they might get, just projecting here, might get a bad result against Liverpool. So that's not going to be good for morale, but he's scored quite a few goals since Jesse Mars has come. So yeah, a goal against Brighton, Wolves and Nottingham Forest. And who are they playing? Fulham. So the right profile for him to score against. He's been quite good. Looking at the sort of numbers, underlying numbers, been quite good actually. So I think he's quite good at shout for 5.7 as well. Just for the other midfield options. Right. If you want another possible Liverpool attacker, my choice maybe is Gakpo. His minutes aren't, well, okay. I guess he got rested against Chelsea, but his minutes is most reliable compared to the rest. Like when we look at Inamo, Darwin Núñez and stuff, it's not reliable that they'll start. And he scored 2 goals against United, which is his breakout game. But in general, he's been uninspiring considering his form in the World Cup. But he would be a differential. That's all I can say. Sarabia, I thought he had a lot more minutes, so actually remove him from the watch list. He's not an option for me. Okay. So, attackers now, forwards. And what's interesting is why I may not get Trippier is a reason. The reasoning for having Kane, I'm not using the same reasoning for Trippier. I don't want Trippier because he's playing against Spurs. So if you think Spurs will likely score, then you're only relying on attacking returns from Trippier, which is quite likely, to be fair. But Trippier will have a high ownership for at least the non-free hit teams, which might be quite a few. So you might want to use him just as a hedge. But I personally may not. Kane, on the other hand, he's against Newcastle, who in the season has been quite good defensively, and against the big teams they typically sit back, and has shown they can keep clean sheets against big teams like with United the other day. Though I don't think they've kept that many clean sheets against big teams, so I wouldn't use that as gospel. but Kane will be owned by lots of managers, non-free hit or free hit. So I think it just makes sense. And his okay, he didn't get return against Spurs, Bournemouth. But his underlying numbers have been so good. He's scored 4 in a row, so I guess he was due a game not scoring. But I think you're guaranteeing at least a goal for Kane, maybe more. Um, I don't know his record against Newcastle, but I think it's quite good. Um, I think, I mean, he's a possible captain option. I think one of the Arsenal Liverpool boys for sure, but Kane has been so good this year, it's hard to argue against him. Watkins. So actually, this is a good time for me to have a look at like why I've targeted some of these attackers. Actually, I'll do that in a moment. Watkins has been on fire. He's been one of the best owns for the past 6 weeks. He's returned in the past 6 weeks, just returned his highest of 16 points. His underlying numbers are there. Villa have been one of the form sides. It's interesting. He's there against Brentford, who don't really keep clean sheets. So I think you gotta have him basically. And then Solanke. So Solanke, if we look at his underlying numbers, are quite okay. He returned 3 returns last week with a combined 0.42 XGI. So that was definitely overperformance, but his actual numbers have been quite good, like nearly 1 a game. So I currently haven't got him in my draft, like my actual team, but might be worth considering actually. I've gone for a slightly bigger name, which you'll see in a mo, but he's quite surprising. And for a 1 week punt against West Ham, who would have played in Europe at home, and they're battling relegation, I think it'd be quite a good differential. And Solanke, if you want to pick up ground in your mini leagues, could be a good option. Okay, so Jesus. I think if you want, I'm going to want a Arsenal defender, Jesus, then that means you have 2 spots for 2 Arsenal attackers. Now the question is, do you go for 2 midfielders or an attacker midfielder? So what are the issues with Jesus? His minutes are not as reliable as, say, a Martinelli or Saka. He's been coming off relatively early in the past 3 games, so like coming off before the 60th minute, but then Arsenal was such in cruise control. In the Liverpool game, we kept it on for 75 minutes, maybe because, well, I guess he scored a goal then, but I guess he scored against West Ham, but Arteta wanted just a different, believed he could score against Liverpool more like, I guess Arteta thought Jesus was the right call against Liverpool that day. But against West Ham, he was off in the 66th minute when we're chasing a goal as well. So what we can see is him and Trossard are rotating with minutes. I think Jesus is a high upside, low floor player, basically. Why I'm saying that is because he's returned in the last 3 games since he returned. And his XG numbers have always been, as we know, ridiculous. But without the minutes, I may want to trust in Martinelli and Saka. The other thing is, there's actually quite a few, surprisingly, maybe it's just because you don't need them long term, quite a few striking options this week. So I think in terms of midfield, I'd rather maybe want the 2 Arsenal midfielders, and then with the strikers, there are ones we're already wanting to fill. Okay, so the Liverpool boys. Minutes, not very good for Firmino. If you knew he'd start, think quite a good differential, but he could be a nostalgic pick for FPL managers, but I wouldn't necessarily go for him. Nunes, similar minutes, not amazing, but yeah, it's really hard to. If you want a punt, you can, but for 8.7 million, it's a lot. Like, if you want a risky pick, I think Jesus is more a risky pick. I don't even know Jesus is a risky pick. He could be a differential as well, because a lot of managers are probably going to try to get him in, especially on free hit. But for those who don't, I reckon most, especially for non-free hit people, won't have Jesus. They would have like a Saka, Martinelli. So then Jesus becomes a differential for teams that are not free hitting. So that's an interesting take, and something to think about. Isaac, He actually has been quite good on the eye test. He scored what, 4 goals in the last 5 games, but always battling with Wilson sometimes with minutes. Played 90 minutes actually against Villa, but I think he is also a differential. Who's it against Spurs though? They haven't been great Spurs, but it's still not a team you'd want to target necessarily for fixtures. Iheanacho, after scoring City, just thought I'd give a shout out, but minutes unreliable. Maybe after scoring he'll start, but if things are going badly, you could easily see him get subbed off. I wouldn't go for him. But right, the last 2 strikers, Antonio. Right, so there is a player missing, which I'll add in a mo. Antonio looked quite good against Arsenal, but I think it's one of those where he put in a good performance, but it wasn't necessarily a good FPL performance. West Ham also in Europe, I probably wouldn't go for him, but he's one of their strikers you can consider. So the player I forgot to add on the watch list was Ivan Toney. So let's have a look at his numbers. So the last 3 weeks, he hasn't been that good actually. But then Newcastle and United are tough players or tough teams to play against. And he scored against Newcastle. So 2 penalties there. And Ivan Toney has been one of the best attackers this season. I like, this is confirmation bias for sure. But if we look at the trend of scored a goal, haven't scored, scored, haven't scored, scored, haven't scored, scored. I think you know where I'm going with this. Haven't scored, scored, haven't scored. I'm thinking he scored next game. That's why. So it's interesting because though they're strikers, I don't always like getting players who are playing against each other on the same team. But attackers, it doesn't really matter. But I think let's have a look at the watch list again. Kane just feels, just for his large ownership, like how much is it? 40%, 39%, so that's relatively high. Kane feels like you kind of need to have him. Watkins, just for his form alone, it's silly not to, right? But maybe Stuart performance of not returning. But then Toney, so I think the choice is, do you want to go for Toney or Jesus? Any other ones I'd maybe... Okay, so it's Jesus, Solanke or Toney. And it's tough. All with home fixtures. Toney's on penalties. Jesus isn't. I think Solanke is actually. Jesus, though, one negative, as we mentioned, is he takes up an Arsenal spot. So the question then becomes a combination, right? So would you want Bowen? Let's play around with this. So would you rather have Jesus? Would you rather have Jesus and then say a Maddison? So then your team will look like this, with the starters being D3, D4, D3, and keeper. Or would you rather have Saka and Toney, or Solanke? But I think Solanke, like Toney's, is a more reliable pick, and money shouldn't be an issue. So it basically comes down to, at least for my selection, Saka or Toney or Maddison and Jesus. I feel like Saka and Jesus, you'd say Jesus maybe edges it in terms of scoring. Then Toney and Maddison, Toney's more reliable. Maddison maybe has higher upside. Toney's on penalties. But Brentford are playing Villa, so a harder fixture. So it's tough. But yeah, so those were the players, right? So I'm just going to quickly give you a list. It's a long video, but this is like one of the most important weeks and is also a fun week. And let's have a look. So never mind this team's, my girlfriend's team. I just used their watch list functionality. And here I feel like some of the players that I must have. I've mentioned some before. I mentioned all of these, but like I probably said which ones I must have for sure. Iverson, just must have in the sense of he'll be your backup keeper, or he could even be starting if you want to save some money as well. White or Gabriel, I think an Arsenal defender is very much needed. Which one? That's up to you. Then Robertson should be here as well. Trent or Robertson? Actually, no. Trent is a must-have. Trent is a must-have. Good attacking returns and likely to keep a clean sheet. Then this is just for bench purposes or even starting Castagno or Fais. One of them be on your bench. Nico Williams, similarly, a must-have for bench option only. Kufau should be here as well, actually. In terms of midfielders, just by the form, Martinelli must be a must-have. But you could, if you want a differential and play around, try to go back for like an Odegaard Saka. But for me, Martinelli has been on fire, must-have. Salah, must-have. Eze or Lise, that's a choice. I think Eze edges it, but one of the two Palace midfielders feels obvious as well. For a bench option or a nice cheap starter, Andreas. Fulham against Leeds, good option at home. Then must-have for forwards, must-haves are Kane and Watkins, for sure. So that would be my template of having Watkins, Kane in the forward line, one of the Palace midfielders, Salah and Arsenal, and then a fourth midfielder that you need to pick, and then an Arsenal defender, Liverpool defender, and then you're filling the last defender and keeper. So I've kept Trippier here just because of his value. He's 6.2 and I've got him for 5.7, and I'm most likely not going to have him, but I just kept it in case I decided I want him. So how will my team look? So most of this is how my team will look. I'm going to go for probably Andreas, as I said. Castagna, Zuma, probably. I can show my starting team in a mo. Right. And 0.6 left in the bank. My team will probably look, so with these three on the bench, actually, but this will be my starting team. So I think I'm going to go for if they concede, it'll be a very bad option, but I think both are essentially like midfielders as well. Trent and Robson will be good defending options. One of White, that might become Gabriel actually, now I'm thinking about it, because maybe I'd want the high upside and get a goal. Salah, I'll talk about captaincy in a mo, but Salah, obvious, Eze, yep. Got lots of home fixtures as well, so everybody's a home fixture apart from Watkins and Kane. But yeah, this is the team I think I'd most likely go for. There are a few I'm considering, so it might change by the time I lock in, but I think this is a very good template. Looking at captaincy, Salah feels obvious, to be honest. Trent could be a nice differential one, but otherwise one of the Arsenal boys, Martinelli or Saka, feels like possibilities. Watkins, I mean, I know it's not I keep doubting him, he's been on my team, but maybe he won't return like a big score after his big score last week, so wouldn't captain him. But Kane possible, but against Newcastle, would you really want to do that? Not sure. But yeah, possibly boring, but Salah has become the Haaland of this week. And then maybe one of the Arsenal boys. If you want, Eze, but after his strong performance, not sure. And after my sound logic of Tony scoring every other game, if he's guaranteed a score, maybe he's a differential pick as well. But yeah, this is my team, and I think it looks quite good actually. The double Liverpool defense, I'm not entirely sure. So if we do our last few changes, just have a look. It's possible we do say actually. So if you started maybe Zuma, for example, Zuma. Let's say we start Zuma and we put in Gehi just on the bench. What we could make this team then is, would you want to kick Eze? Not sure you would though. But if you didn't want Eze and decided I'm gonna have 3 big attackers or 2 8 million, you could have a team then instead of like say Saka, Maddison, Salah, Martinelli. I think the way I've done it, I prefer. And then it's a choice of Saka and Tony or Maddison or Jesus as really just your options you're picking from. Maybe Solanke as well. So actually what happens, so if we did Solanke, we got 2, and then this can then become Saka as well. And you can make up the difference here. So those are the options, but I think what team I'm going to lock in will be this. Maybe aside from, I might actually put Gabriel in, but I'm not going to do that until maybe injury news in case I decide I want Trippier. I'm not going to go for Trippier, which could be a backfire. Could backfire, but you're backing Kane to score. And if you're backing Kane to score, I think logically you shouldn't go for Kane. But yeah, so that was a very long video, and you know, what I think are good players to target for GW32. If you got the free hit, enjoy it. It's like the most fun part of FPL. Most fun part until you submit it, then you realise, oh, should have put Solanke. He scored like a hat trick, whatever. For those not free hitting, hopefully you got a starting 11 and well, hopefully set up. If not, the teams I would target if you haven't got free hit, Arsenal, Liverpool players, because Liverpool just on that front have a very good fixture running from now, so you're not just banking in for this week. This week, Nottingham Forest. The rest of the weeks are looking quite good as well. Arsenal maybe less so actually, because they've got a tough running after this week. But if you haven't got free hit, Liverpool, Arsenal players seem sensible to me. Right, so good luck for Game Week 32. I'll see you in the next video.